Good afternoon everyone. Today in the series of History of India from 1750s to 1857, we will talk about the revolt of 1857, the causes and the consequences. In this first part, we will talk about the revolt of 1857 as the first war of India's independence or as a Sepoy mutiny. There are various kinds of arguments with regard to the characterization of the revolt of 1857. But our focus in this discussion would be on the causes of the revolt of 1857, the long-term causes and the short-term causes, the immediate cause of the greased cartridges, or the long-term causes, the economic factors which were responsible for the revolt of 1857, the social factors, the religious factors, the military factors, how all of them they combined and created such kind of an event which is known as the 1857, and the reverberations of 1857 could be seen later in the India's struggle for independence, when 1857 is also being used as some sort of an inspiration or some sort of a legacy. For in the context of the readings, some of the readings, for example, P.C. Joshi's Rebellion 1857, a symposium, V.D. Savarkar's The Indian War of Independence, Vishnu Bhatt Godse's Memoir of 1857 Rebellion, which is in Marathi, Mazha Pravas, which is translated by Shanta Gokhale and Priya Adarkar, Adventures of a Brahmin Priest, and other readings could be Bismoy Pati's 1857 and Shekhar Bandyopadhyay's book, which has been there from Palasi to Partition. So some of these things could be read in the context of 1857, and when you want to see the background of 1857, and 1857 revolt was not the only revolt in the context of the army or the military, but before that also we find various kinds of mutinies, and Vellore Mutiny was the first mutiny which could be seen as some sort of an earliest attempt to reduce the British paramountcy, and how the soldiers, those who were part of the Vellore Mutiny, they turned their rifles against their superior European officers. So how, when we tend to see these kind of mutinies, these kinds of revolts by the armies, so dissatisfaction or discontent is one of the major reasons we find by which these army units they rebelled. And on the other hand, the kind of attitude which was exhibited by the kind of hierarchy which was there, and the bureaucratic aspirations or bureaucracy of the British, and they did not have any kind of imagination, and they were not able to identify with the sepoys, those who were working for them. So all these kind of situations, they ultimately led to the mutinous conditions. And in the context of Vellore, we find that new turbans, they were being introduced in 1806, and the people, those who were from the army, they declared that the new turban, it was showing some kind of an offensive resemblance to the Christian cap. So what we find is that soldiers, they were aware about their own religious affiliations, and they felt that British, they were trying to pursue a kind of policy in terms of forcing them to use such kind of attire or accessories, or providing them the kind of rules and regulations which were not suiting their religion. So this kind of an attitude of the colonial rulers in the context of the East India Company officials was not suiting the sepoys, and they felt that it was objectionable to their caste to which they belonged, and they refused to wear them. And this also led to, if they will wear them, then they will be excommunicated from their caste. So this fear of being getting excommunicated from their caste led to this kind of a feeling that they should in any way not follow what the British were trying to do. And many a times we see, especially in the case of the Vellore Mutiny, that the old regulation that no soldier should mark his face to denote caste or wear earring when dressed in uniform. This is what an old regulation was, which was now reiterated. And all parades and during all military duties, every soldier of battalion should have his chin clean shaven. So these were some of the changes which were being now talked about, now which were being imposed on the soldiers, and soldiers were not very happy to follow these kind of diktats, and they in a way refused to follow such kind of orders, and such kind of orders which were relating to their dress and other accessories, which were in a way inimical to their own personal feelings, own personal attitudes, own personal beliefs. So this created some kind of embittered relations between the two, and the sepoys, they revolted against the British and killed many of them. We find that 15 officers, they were being killed, and total number of Europeans, those who were killed, were 117, and the number of wounded was 61. So a court of inquiry was appointed to investigate the causes of mutiny, and thereafter we find that it was the first army revolt which was in a way done against the British, and how these kind of revolts by the army in 1824 in Barakpur and in other regiments of India, till we find the expression in the revolt of 1857. So 1857 as a revolt, where you find various sections of people, those who participated. V.D. Savarkar, he has seen the national 1857 as a national rising or the first war of independence, and he also sees Vellore Mutiny as a rehearsal of 1857, the way the Vellore Mutiny took place in 1806, and thereafter it was some sort of a rehearsal of 1857. So the desire for the liberty and the determination to overthrow the colonial rule, they were the basic causes of both the risings. So we find that Vellore Mutiny and thereafter the revolt of 1857, they had this kind of a desire that how the alien domination, it should be done away with. And in both these occurrences, in both these revolts, whether 1806 or 1857, these kind of things, they were manifest, that how the personal beliefs which were associated with the religion or caste, they were the false soldiers, they were being forced by the colonial rulers, East India Company especially, which was there to control these regions. So that was one of the factors, and it was also there that the people, those who saw 1806 mutiny, especially the colonial officials, those who were associated with the 1806 mutiny or Vellore Mutiny, they saw it as an act in which only sepoys were concerned. So they were not ready to see the larger issue which was involved. They were only concerned with the kind of mutiny which was concerned with the army or the sepoys. Similarly, we see before the revolt of 1857, in March 1857, specific to be 29th March, in a place called Barakpur near Calcutta, sepoy named Mangal Pandey, he fired at a European officer, and the comrades, those who were there with him, they refused to arrest him when ordered by their European superiors. So we find that Indian sepoys, they were also they did not want to follow such kind of orders, and what was done by Mangal Pandey was also in the response of the issue of the greased cartridges, because greased cartridges which were initiated by the British, they had to be bitten off by mouth, the paper had to be removed, and certain things in the context of information which were circulating were that the cow as well as pig's fat was used in the paper which was to be bitten off by mouth, and it will defile or the religious beliefs of both the Hindus as well as the Muslims. So company in a way felt that it initially issued a clarification that nothing of this sort had happened, but later when inquiry was conducted, it was found to be true that definitely the pig's fat as well as the cow's fat, both of them, they were being used in those cartridges, where the new Enfield rifle which was introduced by the British instead of the earlier brown Bess, which was the earlier rifle which was there. So these kind of issues antagonized the sepoys, and earlier we have seen that it was some of the immediate cause, if we want to see in the context of the revolt of 1857, but the long term subjugation to which sepoys were subjected, the long term policies of the British in the context of the economy, social, cultural, political. So, all of them in a cumulative manner provided a kind of spark to the revolt of 1857, and the greased cartridges issue was the kind of just kind of a spark which could ignite the people, those who wanted to in a way challenge the British rule. And Mangal Pandey was in a way used in a court martialed. He was hanged by the British, and thereafter, if we want to see the background of the revolt of 1857, it had to be located that it was mainly affecting because the mutiny mainly affected the Bengal Army, but Bengal Army was the largest army, and around half of the sepoys which were there in the East India Company, they were there in the Bengal Army. So, it was a huge army, and in the revolt, Punjabi and the Gurkha soldiers, they helped the British in the suppression of the revolt, and largely the Madras and the Bombay regiments, they remained quiet. So, what we find in the revolt of 1857 is that the Bengal Army, which had a lot of sepoys, majorly half of the Indian sepoys, they were being employed there, and these sepoys, when they revolted, that means half of the Indian sepoys, they had rebelled against the British. So, that was the kind of background in which one has to locate. We just cannot say that only one regiment of the East India Company's army, it revolted. We have to see the picture in a very larger context. We have to also realize the fact that the soldiers or the sepoys, they were largely formed the homogeneous character. They were from a high caste background, though they had a number of grievances against the British, and they tried to show them, and many a times the religious beliefs, they came into conflict with the new service conditions which were imposed in 1820s 30s. Their salary levels, they dropped, and they suffered discrimination in matters of promotion and pension. So, what we find is that sepoys, they were of the Bengal Army, their homogeneous character was maintained by the company, and they were given some kind of privileges by the company as late as 1820s and 30s, and thereafter, when new regulations of the army came, then they had to work in certain areas. They had to go to those areas and work in those areas. They will not be paid extra bhatta for that. Bhatta was the allowance which they were getting when they were working in the far flung areas or when they were going across the seas, and many of them, they did not want to go across the seas because that will defile their caste status. They will be excommunicated from their caste. They will not be accepted back in the caste. So, all these kind of things, they were associated with the sepoys, and company wanted them to work across the seas, and because of the decrease in the bhatta, they felt discontented. Many times the kind of discrimination which they faced in the context of the promotions, that a sepoy could not go beyond the rank of a subedar, and many times if they will not go and work in overseas areas, they will not get the pension. So, such kind of things, they were there, and this antagonized the sepoys, and because the question of working outside the regions, which for example going to Burma or Afghanistan or Sindh was not liked by the sepoys, and this kind of a religious belief, when they will go out of bounds of the Indian regions and through seas, then they have to face this kind of a situation that they will be excommunicated from their caste. And the issue of the annexation of Awadh in 1856 was another factor, because many of the sepoys from these regions, they were employed from the Awadh region, and sepoys, they were working in a very loyal kind of a manner, and when Awadh was annexed by the East India Company, then the sepoys, they felt that they had been in a way cheated. They any kind of loyalty for the company had not paid off, and we see that Shekhar Bandyopadhyay, he talks about this idea that revolt was preceded by about 14,000 petitions from sepoys about the hardships relating to the revenue system. So, how sepoys and the revenue system, how they were linked together, this has to be seen in the context that many of the sepoys, those who came from Awadh, they belong to the agricultural families. Their fathers, their brothers, all of them, they were engaged in agricultural operations. So anything which was done with regard to the agricultural practices would not be liked by them, and they reacted in the context that in the revenue system, when more and more revenue was being demanded from their brethren, those who were in the agricultural sector, then it was not liked by the sepoys. Then what we also find in the context of Awadh is that a summary settlement in 1856 was also being done, where Talognas, they were being dispossessed from their jagirs, and their forts, they were demolished, and their estates, they were being taken, they were being disarmed. So they lost a lot of status and they lost a lot of power in the local society. So what we find is that Talognas, they were an important section of the Awadh sector, Awadh society, and when they lost their power, and when many of them, they went back to their own villages which were earlier assigned to them, and when they went to such kind of villages, they were welcomed by their former tenants or agriculturalists. So from that point of view, the agriculturalists, to whom the Talognas, they were connected that way, they also formed some kind of an alliance where Talognas as well as the agriculturists, both of them, they turned against the British. So this kind of a situation where Talognas, they were being dispossessed, and how they felt in that kind of a situation where they also revolted against the British, were both peasants as well as the Talognas. So when British, they felt that they wanted to provide some kind of solace to the agriculturalists, but in that case that was also not being done. And Thomas Metcalfe, he argues that they were bound by the ties of kinship and the feudal loyalty, and villagers, they were happy to acknowledge claims of their lords, and they joined hands against their common enemy, the British. So Metcalfe talks in this context that how both of them, they came together, they were bound by the kinship and the feudal loyalties, and both of them, they realized that their common enemy was the British, because Talognas, they had been dispossessed by the British, and the higher revenue demand which was being put for the agriculturalist was not suitable for them. So this kind of a situation in 1856 we find, and apart from that we also see why did the sepoys revolt. That is one idea, and various proclamations at different places, they talk about the immediate cause, that how British, they wanted to convert them into Christianity. So this kind of a nexus where you will find that the people, they will be converted into Christians, and when they will be converted into Christians, so religion as a way of life in those times was there, and people were very closely felt about their religion. And British, because of their missionaries activities in Sri Rampur and in other regions, they wanted more and more people to be converted to Christianity. If we see the military causes, we have already discussed the issue of the greased cartridges, that how Enfield rifle was replaced, Enfield rifle came and brown bass was replaced with the Enfield rifles, and how in a way maltreatment to the soldiers, that was also given, because you find that the racial discrimination was there, not in the army but in every sphere, in every section of the society, felt that they were being discriminated by the British, and British, they wanted that. In the political sphere also, we find that the doctrine of lapse, which was introduced by Lord Dalhousie, and it was some system of an annexation will take place, and because of these annexations, the princes, they will not be able to install their own heirs to the throne, because the permission or the tikka had to be taken from the East India Company. So it was seen that lapse was generally the lapse of all morals on the part of the East India Company, that East India Company was not following any kind of morals, and this policy of doctrine of lapse, where annexations had to be done, was not liked by many of the political princes, rather the princely states. They were not happy with this kind of a situation. So this was one of the political causes with regard to the revolt. And many a times, for example, the pension of Peshwa Baji Rao, it was which was given to Nana Sahib, that was also stopped by the East India Company. So they also wanted that the pension had to be paid. And some of the utterances of people like Charles Napier, who argued that were I Emperor of India for 12 years, no Indian prince would exist. The Nizam should be no more heard of, Nepal would be ours. In 1856, Lord Canning, he communicated that succeeding prince to Mughal ruler would have to renounce the regal title and ancestral Mughal palaces. And the continued foreignness of British was another cause. So what we find during this period is that the kind of utterances which were made by the people, those who were the part of the East India Company, they felt that they will create that kind of a situation, that they will, all the Indian princes, they will vanish, and the kind of power, the kind of prestige which was the kind of reputation which was associated with the Mughal ruler, Mughal palaces, that would also go away, because these kind of announcements, they were being made that the ancestral palaces of the Mughals, they had to renounce them. They will no longer be called emperors. So this continued foreignness of the British was an important consideration at that point of time. And if we see this kind of a situation, we will find in the next session, when we will talk about the causes and the consequences, we will further elaborate about the other causes which were very, very important with regard to the revolt of 1857. Now I would like to end the discussion at this point of time. Thank you very much.